Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Is it possible to steal a twin's identity and live their life? Twins are almost always of keen interest to others when they appear somewhere together. Not surprisingly, they have also always been the subject of intense scrutiny for scientific research as well. Such research is considered key in studying the genetics of their behavior from biology to psychology. Many twins claim to feel the mood, condition, and sometimes even physical pain of their brother or sister, even when they are far away. Sometimes they even repeat the fate of each other. A special connection have identical twins because they appear as a result of division of one fertilized egg. They not only have a strong external resemblance, but even their fingerprints are very similar in the type of pattern and the number of lines, although the detailed pattern, of course, differs. The story of twin sisters Sunny and Gina Khan looks like a script for a thriller or even a horror movie, except that it happened in real life. The girls were separated in early childhood, and later they were reunited. But instead of joy, they were seized by a strange feeling that grew into envy and constant rivalry in everything. Each of the girls considered her sister to be more successful and lucky, and the constant striving to be better at any cost resulted in a real tragedy. Sisters Sunny and Gina Khan. April 30th, 1974, in a simple family living in one of the provinces of South Korea, were born twin daughters who were given the names Sunny and Gina. Spouses Han lived modestly, if not to say poorly, and the appearance of their two children seriously undermined the family budget. Parents constantly scandalized, and when the girls were not yet 2 years old, decided to separate. In this case, the children during the divorce process, they simply shared. Father took Gina and went to a neighboring city, and the mother with Sunny remained in her native province. The former spouses did not communicate for almost 4 years, and all this time the sisters also did not see each other. However, in 1980, Mr. Khan met with a woman who decided to marry and create a family, but his new lover immediately disliked Gina. The woman put the question on the edge and forced the man to return the child to his mother, agreeing to become his wife only in this case. In the fall of the same year, he brought the girl to his ex-wife and just left her there without going into explanations and without even paying attention to the situation in the house. Then he left and never took any further interest in the fate of his children, nor did he help them financially. The mother of the girls by that time had serious problems with alcohol, had no stable job, and was addicted to gambling, which caused her to incur huge debts. The woman could leave home for days at a time, leaving her daughters alone, with a pack of cheap convenience foods, or even no food at all. They were hungry, afraid, and seemed to have no one else in the world but each other. Nevertheless, the sisters' relationship was rapidly deteriorating. They began to fight over literally everything, and constantly competed for their mother's attention. Often their quarrels ended in fierce fights with bruises, abrasions, and torn pieces of hair. The mother never separated her daughters or tried to reconcile them. As she herself said in an interview many years later, fights between siblings were considered normal in Korea, so she did not intervene. Escape to the United States of America. In the early 1980s, Mrs. Han, unable to pay off her mounting debts and fearing for her life and the safety of her girls, decided to flee the country to the ocean to escape creditors and try to make a fresh start. The woman wanted to go to the sunny state of California, which she had only seen in pictures and magazines. She packed only the bare necessities in her suitcase and bought one-way tickets for herself and her children. They settled in Irvine, a city in Orange County, California, and immediately faced a host of problems. They had no friends, acquaintances, or relatives to help them in any way. Mrs. Han did not know English and therefore could not get a job, and the girls, without knowledge of the language, had a very difficult time in school. The family was barely making ends meet, living on a meager allowance, and the future seemed ghostly and frightening. It took several years for the mother and children to adapt to the new place, but when life seemed to be getting better, the woman became addicted to alcohol and gambling again. The situation repeated itself, but now she also began to show mental disorders. She was unable to raise her own daughters and wanted to put them in an orphanage or foster home. In 1986, Mrs. Han's sister moved to California with her husband. The couple had no children of their own, and after learning about the situation in the family of a relative, she herself offered her to take the 12-year-old girls to her for upbringing. Mrs. Han accepted the offer gladly, but did not even talk to her daughters about it. She quickly packed their belongings in a suitcase, took a bus to Sunny and Gina in a neighboring town, and simply dropped them off at the bus stop at her sister's house, telling them where to go. The girls were confused, scared, but they were welcomed with open arms at their aunt's house, and soon their lives began to resemble a fairy tale. Auntie and her husband did everything they could to make the sisters feel comfortable and in need of nothing. Sunny and Gina ate enough for the first time in their lives, wore beautiful new clothes, and attended a prestigious school where they were taken by car. Nevertheless, not only did the relationship between the sisters not improve, but it escalated to the breaking point. They studied together in the same class and constantly competed in everything. The girls were the best students, and each of them tried to bypass her sister in this. They also played sports, trying to perform better than their sister, shared friends, competed for the attention of teachers and guardians, and liked boys. This rivalry seemed to really stimulate and spur the sisters on, pushing them to be the best at everything. They did become the best students in their school, showed high performance in sports, were meticulous about their appearance, and were an example to others. The only thing that never happened between them was love. Each of the sisters thought that the second sister got the best, so she did not want to fall behind and give in. It should be noted that Sunny was more open, friendly, and communicative, so it was easier for her to make friends or relationships with boys. Teachers treated her better, and guardians, without realizing it, showed more tenderness and care to her. But Gina seemed to be driven by anger and hatred. She would go out of her way to beat her sister and prove to everyone that she was better. From the army to the alcoholic to the gambler. After high school, the sisters' paths diverged. Gina decided that she could realize herself as a soldier and signed a 4-year contract, joining the U.S. Air Force. The girl was hardy, well-prepared physically, but she soon realized that the military service she did not like at all. Here reigned strict discipline and order. Orders were not discussed, and the soldier did not actually belong to himself. After a year, she made her first attempt to break the contract, but she failed. After another 6 months, she went on a deception, saying that her father was seriously ill and she needed to take care of him. The management demanded proof in the form of a medical certificate, which of course she could not get anywhere. So, another 6 months or so passed, and Gina was literally suffocating without any personal freedom. Her unit was transferred to Lackland Air Force Base, located in Bexar County, Texas. It is the only place for the U.S. Air Force and Space Force enlisted for basic military training. In addition, Lackland is best known as the only military training location for the U.S. Air Force. Many people dream of going here, but for Han, this base seemed like a real prison. Gina didn't want to wait another 2 years for her contract to expire, so she decided to cheat again. She went to a senior officer and informed him about her unconventional orientation. It should be noted that it was 1994, and at that time such a scandalous statement was a good reason for immediate termination of the contract. Freed from her obligations, Gina returned back to California and settled in the suburbs of Los Angeles. Pretty 20-year-old girl quickly found a job in one of the popular casinos with a salary of about $20,000 a year. The sum was small even for that time, but tips sometimes exceeded her daily earnings several times over. For a while, it seemed that Gina's life was getting better. She was making good money, could afford to buy clothes and cosmetics in brand-name stores, rented a place in a good neighborhood, and had her own, albeit used, car. But that didn't last long. Soon, she became addicted to hot drinks and began to use them almost daily. But that wasn't the worst of it. One day, Khan, after a work shift, after picking up her paycheck and receiving a decent amount as a tip, decided to try her luck and sat down at a slot machine. Within a couple of hours, she lost all the money she had earned. But instead of regret, she woke up a real painful excitement. She wanted to win back and hit the jackpot. Every day, after the end of the shift, she drank and sat down at the machines, where she lost all the money. At first, she gambled only her paycheck and tips, but soon she began borrowing money from colleagues and friends, which caused her to get into debt. Gina did not realize that she was repeating the fate of her mother, who also had a problem with alcohol and gambling, and for this reason, the woman once left her native country, fleeing to America with 2 children in her arms. Gina's addictions worsened. Soon she stopped lending money because she simply did not pay them back, and she descended into banal theft. For the first time, she stole cash from the purse of her colleague, but the latter, having discovered the loss, felt sorry for Han and did not report her to the police. When the situation was repeated, the thief was brought to administrative responsibility, but she got off with only a fine and a suspended sentence. A few months later, she stole her aunt who raised her, visiting her. In mid-1995, Gina was convicted of theft and for the first time received a real sentence, going to prison for 3 months, but got out early after less than a month. After that, she was in the sight of the police a couple more times for drunken debauchery, but spent no more than a few days behind bars. Successful twin. Sunny went to college after high school and then became a student at a prestigious university. She studied law, received a scholarship, made a lot of successful and wealthy friends, revolved in high society circles, and lived that annoyingly perfect life, which these days brag on social networks. She rented a spacious apartment in a luxury apartment complex with its own swimming pool and gym, located in an upscale neighborhood. Sunny shared the rent with her close friend and fellow student Helena Smith, who was the heiress of very wealthy parents. Han had her own expensive white BMW car, and she was dating a handsome and promising young man from an intelligent family who was studying at medical school and dreamed of a career as a surgeon. It seemed that she was the complete opposite of her sister, achieved everything she dreamed of, and a long and happy life was ahead of her. About her twin sister, Sunny almost did not remember. They have not seen and did not communicate since graduation from high school. She knew from her aunt's words that Gina had already been in jail a couple of times for theft, had problems with alcohol, and got into debt because of gambling. The girl was too busy with her studies, relationships, and building her perfect life. She did not try to find her sister, somehow contact her, and offer help. However, in early 1996, Gina unexpectedly contacted her sister and asked for help. Is it possible to misappropriate someone else's life? In April 1996, Gina called Sunny and asked to see her. The sisters saw each other for the first time in 4 years, but did not feel any joy about it. They sat across from each other in a cafe, and the people around them did not take their eyes off them, because it seemed like one person sitting in front of a mirror. Gina complained to her sister that she was in serious trouble and didn't know what to do. Gina was unemployed, but with a lot of debt. She had nowhere to live and no one to turn to. Sunny listened carefully to her sister and genuinely felt sorry for her. She suggested that Gina stay in her apartment for the time being, without even consulting Helena. The same day, Gina moved into her sister's apartment with only a bag and her belongings. Of course, Gina had heard that Sunny was not poor, but she had not expected to see such a luxurious and cozy apartment in a comfortable residential complex, where there was everything one could dream of. Naturally, Gina did not pay for the apartment, and for more than a month she simply lived at her sister's expense. Every day she was more and more eaten up by envy and hatred. She constantly thought about how her life could have turned out. How was her sister better than her? At this time, Gina had a seemingly crazy thought. After all, she and Sunny were identical in appearance, and no one but her mother and aunt had ever distinguished them. Gina wondered, what if the twin just disappeared, and she could live her perfect life? In her opinion, no one would even notice the switch, as well as the disappearance of Gina herself, who had almost no friends, and her relatives frankly disliked her. Soon, such thoughts turned into an obsession. Gradually, an insidious plan matured in Gina's mind. She carefully watched with whom her sister communicates, where she goes, how she speaks and dresses, exactly copied her hair, makeup, and demeanor. Gina tried to socialize with her sister's friends as much as possible to learn more about them so they wouldn't notice the switch. The sisters still did not find common ground and constantly quarreled. As the main argument, Sunny threatened to evict her sister every time, but since she had nowhere else to go, she just gave up and stored up her hatred. On August 18, 1996, after another scandal, Gina had been drinking, and while her sister and a neighbor went somewhere else, she went through the apartment and, taking all the cash found there, went to the casino. When Sunny and Helena returned home, they found the place a mess and the money missing. They immediately realized what had happened and went to the police because they could no longer tolerate the antics of Gina. The girl was arrested the same night right in the casino. She was found guilty and sent to prison for 6 months, but after 2 months, the conditions of her imprisonment were relaxed, and the convict could leave the prison for 6 hours a day to go to work, but had to return to the prison at night. She complied for 2 weeks, and then decided to escape to complete her plan. An insidious plot. Once free, Gina hitchhiked back to Orange County. She was not a dangerous criminal, so the search for her was not a full-time endeavor. Since Gina had no money, she was forced to spend the night in a homeless shelter in a very disadvantaged neighborhood. She wanted to kill her sister as soon as possible and take her place, but she couldn't do it alone, and it was impossible to hire a hitman on credit. Then Gina recruited 2 local teenagers, whom she met in the same troubled neighborhood. They turned out to be Archie Bryant and his buddy Joni Syrat. The girl promised to pay each of them $100 in case of success. The guys prepared for the crime thoroughly, bought rope, duct tape, and even somewhere got a gun, which however was not loaded, but could be used for intimidation. On November 15, 1996, Gina, having borrowed money from acquaintances, rented a used Ford Mustang, on which she and her accomplices were to go to her sister's house. All was to happen on Wednesday, November 20th, in the afternoon, when Sunny, according to the calculations of her sister, would definitely be home alone. And to make a reconnaissance, and to make sure of it, the intruders bought a pack of magazines, so that Johnny, under the guise of a salesman, would look into the apartment and check who was inside. The plan seemed flawless, the roles were written, and each of the criminal trio knew what he had to do. But suddenly everything went wrong, as they had originally intended. A failed assassination attempt. On the appointed day, around noon, a Mustang pulled up to the apartment complex where Sunny lived and 2 guys got out. Archie stealthily stood aside while Johnny went with the magazines to the victim's apartment. He knocked, and the door was opened by Sunny, who, however, did not bother to knock, and saying she didn't want anything, simply slammed the door in his face. Johnny went back to his assistants, told them everything, and they discussed the details of the plan once more. Somehow, no one had any doubts that the girl might not have been home alone, only because she had opened the door herself without calling anyone. Having finished discussing the nuances, the young men took the rope, duct tape, and gun from the car and went back to the apartment. Around 1 o'clock, Johnny called the apartment again, and Archie stood a little ways away, preparing to kick the door down as soon as Sunny opened it. By then, however, Sunny had gone to take a shower because she was about to leave for an important meeting. Her neighbor was sitting in the living room in front of the TV, and when she heard the bell ring, she didn't even want to open the door. But the unexpected visitor was persistent, so after a couple minutes, Smith gave up and headed for the door. As soon as the lock clicked and the door began to open, the guys, without ceremony, kicked it out, knocked the girl to the floor, and only then realized that it was not Sunny in front of them. Threatening with a gun, they tied Helena up, duct-taped her mouth shut, and then Johnny ran to Gina to ask her how to handle the situation and whether to let the witness live. He took with him a bank card lying on the dresser in Sunny's name. At this time, Sunny, still in the bathroom, heard a noise and cautiously peeked out. She decided that burglars had broken into the house, grabbed the cell phone in the hallway, and went back into the bathroom and started calling the emergency services. All she had time to do was give the address and tell them about the armed robbery when the connection was suddenly cut off, and the door to the room swung open with a powerful kick. Archie pulled a terrified Sunny out by the hair, tied her up with rope, taped her mouth shut, and threw her on the floor next to a bound Helena. The friends expected to be tortured to find out where the money and valuables were in the house, or to be abused, but just a few minutes later the police arrived. Johnny and Gina were still in the Mustang when the police arrived at the house. First, 3 law enforcement officers ran past them, and a few minutes later another car came to help. Since it was a hostage situation, all forces were rushed to the call. A police officer who was running by was radioed the number of the apartment, and this was heard by the intruders sitting in the car. Gina got out of the car and yelled that she was Sunny Hahn. The law enforcer looked at her but didn't understand what that said. He asked her to wait and ran to the scene, where his colleagues had already managed to disarm the attacker and rescue the hostages. When the police officer entered the apartment, he was shocked and bewildered. In front of him, frightened and crying, sat the same girl he had just run past on the street. He asked her name, and when she said her name was Sunny Khan, the police officer doubted for a moment that what was happening was real. He thought he was going crazy, because the same person could not be in two places at the same time. The man, telling his colleague that he needed to check something, jumped back into the yard, but the Ford Mustang with the girl and her accomplice had already disappeared. The good twin and the bad twin? When Gina saw the police arriving and heard the apartment number being called on the radio, she realized that the attempt had failed. Then she took a desperate step, jumping out of the car and identifying herself by her sister's name. The girl wanted to make herself look like a victim, saying that the real criminal is now in her apartment, but the hurried officer simply did not listen to her and only asked to wait. Naturally, Gina did not wait. She and Johnny went to the nearest ATM, where they were able to withdraw a few $1,000s from her sister's stolen card. And then the criminals rushed towards the Mexican border, but first, they needed to change their car for something less conspicuous. At the car dealership, Gina introduced herself with her sister's name, but when filling out the paperwork, she made the mistake of writing her real name. The employees thought this was very strange and asked her to wait for a while to settle the formalities, then informed the management, and they called the police. When arrested, Gina continued to insist that Sunny was her, and the other sister was pretending to be her. The identity of each of the girls was established only by fingerprints, but even after that, at the investigation and in the courtroom, they both continued to introduce themselves as Sunny Khan. At first glance, the Khan sisters seemed to be typical good and bad twins, but a deeper examination of their history revealed that this was not the case at all. While Gina suffered from addictions, regularly got into trouble, and had several criminal records, Sunny built a happy and successful life. However, after the sisters' paths diverged, and they stopped constantly competing with each other, Sunny lost her main incentive. She entered a prestigious university, but in the second year of her academic performance began to fall, and the girl lost her scholarship. To be able to pay for her studies, she got a job as a dancer in one of the nightclubs in the neighboring city, and carefully hid it from her friends and boyfriend. Sunny tried to maintain a picture of an ideal life, which in reality she was no longer living. Trial and sentencing. Gina and her minor accomplices were charged with conspiracy to murder Sunny Khan. The girl was also accused of trying to take the identity of her twin sister, whose name she introduced herself even during the hearing. In general, watching the process was curious and creepy at the same time, because the sisters, being on the same emotional wave, simultaneously began to cry, experienced panic attacks, and at one of the sessions simultaneously lost consciousness. Gina claimed she didn't intend to kill her sister at all, but only wanted to get her belongings out of her apartment. Archie and Johnny were supposed to help her with that, but the guys decided to play gangsters and scare Sunny and her neighbor, but a little too much. The defendants pointed out that the gun was not loaded, so no real harm would have been done to the girls. On November 20th, 1997, a year after the attempted murder, the court reached its verdict. The jury took into account that Gina was previously convicted multiple times, escaped from prison, and at the time of this crime was wanted. Taking all of this into account, Gina Khan was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 26 years in prison. Her accomplices Archie Bryant and Jonia Sairat received 14 and 8 years respectively, the aftermath and cultural reflection of the case. In May 2018, a California state commission granted Gina's attorney's petition, and she was released after serving 21 years. It is worth noting that she received support from Sunny in the matter of parole, because her sister was able to forgive her. Once free, Gina moved into the house of her elderly mother, whom she now takes care of. The story of the Khan sisters was widely covered in the press, became a topic for numerous issues of popular talk shows, and also formed the basis of a number of documentaries and feature films. What do you think of the twins' story? Write in the comments. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to my channel. There are many shocking stories ahead of you.